they've remodeled their entire house, but they didn't touch their plumbing. Mechanical tools that basically are connected to an auger. They spin around at a high RPM and basically grind out any of this corrosion that customers are watching us do the camera inspection, and they're seeing it while our crews are performing the inspection, and it really blows your mind.
Hello, everyone. Today is May 14th, 2024. My guest is Eric DeWert. Eric is a manager at Pipe Restoration Solutions. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Can you introduce your role and what services and products Pipe Restoration Solutions provides?
Yeah, so I'm an account manager at PRS, Pipe Restoration Solutions. So I deal with business development, getting new projects, kind of running through the whole sales process, and then working with our team in the steps of the entire project, and then going from start to finish. You know, we basically what we do is, instead of ripping out and replacing sewer or storm drains, we go in through existing access and rehabilitate the lines from within. So we give new life to old pipes, basically, without having to go through the hassle of ripping through floors, walls, whatnot, in order to put new pipes in. So we basically start everything off with our camera inspections. We do camera inspections, cleaning, and then ultimately the rehabilitation process, which is pipe lining.
Okay. And so you spoke about pipe lining, and that's the rehabilitation process. Could you dive deeper into that?
Yeah. So basically, and I have some samples here, but basically a lot of times, especially if it's cast iron, a lot of times the pipes are going to look something like this. Corroded on the inside. Cast iron builds up upon itself. It oxidizes over time. So the mixture of air and water over time, cast iron basically, like I said, corrodes itself. So there's a life expectancy for cast iron that's anywhere around 50-ish years. But basically, we go in, see pipes like this. We'll take mechanical tools similar to this. And we have different head attachments as well, but we'll basically take mechanical tools, grind out the corrosion. If we notice that there's any weaker points in the pipe, then we'll use something a little less aggressive than this. We can even go down to something as fine as a sandpaper attachment. So if we see that the pipe's really brittle, we go ahead and we grind everything out, get the pipe as close back to its original diameter as possible. And here we have a cleaned pipe, which it has a crack in it, or a fault, I guess you could say. But basically, we get it nice and smooth back to its original diameter. And then what we do is we go ahead and we get a felt liner. It's similar to a sock. It's just a felt liner right here. And we saturate this with a 2-part epoxy. And once we measure everything out prior to installing, but once the liner is saturated with the epoxy, we also have a bladder inside that we go ahead and we fold it up, use one point of access to install it, so we can use a clean out, we can pull toilets, but we basically use one point of access to push the liner into one spot, and then we have a second point of access downstream where we pull it into place. Once the liner's into place, we inflate the bladder with air compressors. It helps the liner and the epoxy adhere to the inside of the pipe. And then it takes about 4 to 6 hours for the epoxy to cure. And then once the epoxy is cured, we extract the bladder and the liner stays in. And we extract the bladder, but then you have a brand new smooth epoxy pipe within the existing pipe structure. And the life expectancy of the epoxy is 50+ years. So it is exactly like putting a new pipe within the old pipe without having to deal with the construction, damage, destruction of walls, floors, whatever is basically between you and the pipe. So it's a long-term solution to any sewer or storm drain problems. without having to go through the hassle of ripping everything up.
Okay. And where does PRS service currently?
We have the ability to go nationwide. We have 2 offices out here in Southern California, one in Irvine, where I'm based out of. We have another office up in Harbor City, which is closer to the LA area. But we do service all of Southern California. We go all the way down to San Diego, go all the way up north to, we have projects up in Ventura, Santa Barbara, but then we also have 4 offices over in Florida. So we work nationwide. We have a couple project going on in Texas right now, but I mean, for the most part, out of our 2 offices out here, we service pretty much anywhere in Southern California, Central California, and then surrounding states. Just depends on where our projects are needed.
Okay. And do you see common problems across all those states? Does PRS see common problems with sewer lines and pipes that require to either be ripped out, or they require a novel solution like what PRS provides?
Yeah, so I mean, there's, we recommend at least getting a camera inspection done, more so preventative maintenance, and that's kind of where we come in. We don't necessarily, I mean, we can work, emergency problems, but a lot of times emergency problems are, needed right now, here and there. There are times where we can do that, but we are more so of a project-based company. So we kind of work project to project. But with that being said, I mean, common problems, I mean, like I said, anything over 30 years, if it's cast iron, life expectancy is 50 years. So if it's anything over 30 years, we definitely recommend just at least taking a look, getting an inspection done to see exactly what's going on inside the pipes. Because a lot of times with plumbing in general, they're behind walls, underground. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
So once we do the camera inspection, that really gives us all the information that we need to know in order to do a project. But with that, there are lots of factors that can come into how quickly the lines corrode, how, if there's mature trees around, you might see root intrusion problems. There's a lot of factors that go into it. Humidity, a lot of properties that we've worked on close to the beach, the salinity in the air will speed up that oxidation process with cast iron. So, there are lots of different problems that can happen that occur throughout the country. It just depends on different environmental factors, humidity, dryness. A lot of times too, especially with cast iron, a lot of people, will come across and they'll say, well, we haven't used that drain line in a long time. That's a bathroom that we never use. Cast iron needs to stay moist, needs to stay wet, because otherwise we kind of assimilate it to, if your hands are dry, you put lotion on your hands to prevent them from cracking. If there's a cast iron sewer line that doesn't ever get used, it will eventually dry up to the point to where it will start to crack. So, there are a lot of factors that go into it. It's, usage of the line, environmental factors, and then just natural corrosion over time.
That makes sense. And you've mentioned cast iron. Are there alternatives to cast iron?
Yeah, so I think in probably the last 30 to 40 years or so, a lot of, the benefits cast iron is, and a lot of, residential, commercial, high-rise buildings, they'll use cast iron in their vertical stacks because it's quieter than, ABS. ABS is the hard black plastic piping, which that has a life expectancy of 50 to 75-ish years. So a lot in the last 30 to 40 years, that's probably been a more common installation method. But then there are certain regulations in certain municipalities where cast iron is the only option. For high rises, cast iron, it has to be cast iron. I think in California, due to earthquakes, whatnot, cast iron is the main option for high rise buildings going vertically, multiple stories. But then ABS is good as well. But I mean, we can rehabilitate ABS, cast iron, clay, PVC pipe, sometimes galvanized steel pipe. But really, it all depends on. I mean, I'd say the majority of our work is with cast iron, ABS pipe, and then also clay pipe.
Okay, but the epoxy and your PRS's solution works for any of those pipes.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, great. And so when, are there any other rehabilitation services besides the epoxy, or is that the service where, you're coming in to inspect and then seeing the state of the pipe, possibly taking out all of that gunk and getting the diameter back to the original, and then the epoxy? Is there anything else, or is that
there's a couple different solutions. For the most part, ours is a structural solution with the epoxy pipe. You can see that there's a thin layer and that's basically the new pipe. So this on a 2-inch pipe, it is I believe it's 2 millimeters thick. So it's a structural pipe. In certain instances where there's maybe small hairline fractures, we do have a spray epoxy coating that we use where it's not structural, but it will protect the inside of the pipe from anything leaking out. It's not necessarily the spray coating is not necessarily a structural fix for something. If there's a hole in the pipe that's as big as this blue portion, and that's our structural liner. If there's a hole in the pipe, the spray epoxy is not going to be able to fix something like that, whereas the structural liner can. But if there are small hairline fractures, the rest of the pipe looks like it's in decent condition. The spray epoxy is a good solution to prevent any leaks or any sewer odors coming out. So it really all depends, and plumbing, it varies so much from building to building, area to area. So it really depends. And like I mentioned, the camera inspection really tells us all we need to know about the layout of the pipe, the total amount of linear footage, the condition of the pipe, and then different access points that we would need in order to install.
Okay. And so when it comes to, homeowner associations, multifamily living, are there any considerations that you make before the inspection and before any sort of solution is applied?
Yeah, so I mean, HOAs are one of our specialties. We've worked with thousands of HOAs throughout the country over the last 20 plus years. So HOAs are one of our specific markets that we specialize in. And we really do a good job of managing the project from start to finish and being in good communication with the residents and the board and the community as a whole, in letting them know what our process looks like, where we might need access into the units, what days we might need access into the units, what water shutoff times are going to be during the project, etc. Just we try to make sure that everyone is as informed of what we will be doing along the whole process as possible, just to make it smoother and allow everyone to be on the same page.
Absolutely. And when it comes to storm drain issues, and residents who actually deal with that, especially this last wet season, it's a huge deal, and it's constantly on their mind that say their storm drain is back, is clogged, and then all the water's coming up and then eventually flooding their home. That's something that they want to know. What's the process like? What's the timeline?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a community that we've been at. It's one of the largest HOAs in the country. I believe it's the second largest HOA in the country. It's called Laguna Woods. It's over here, and it's got its own zip code. So that's how big the community is. But we've been there for a little over 5 years, and I believe we still have another 5 years left of work. And I think we have 4 crews there that have been consistently there the whole time, that we're just constantly doing work there. I think there's a couple of different associations within that community that operate. So yeah, we try to be as upfront and communicative about our whole entire process with every resident involved in the process. We give them a notice of when we're going to be working on their building or on their unit, and then let them know when water shut off it needs to be, and kind of walk them through the whole process with us, just so we're all on the same page, and we can get the solution to be finished, so we can move on to the next section of the community. But we like to make sure that we're as upfront with community members as possible, just because it mitigates any problems moving forward.
That's great. And are there any permits or in this type of work, or yep?
It depends on different municipalities, really. Permits can be required a lot of times. Sometimes we don't need permits because we're not physically changing the structure of anything. We're just lining within. But then there are times, if there's a pipe that's collapsed, really there's no option other than to traditionally replace it, either dig up or create access into a wall to traditionally replace that section. The collapsed pipe, you're not gonna see any drainage whatsoever. You may experience, if there's root intrusion or a backup, it may back your drains up for a bit, but then you'll notice over time that it slowly drains out. So that wouldn't be a fully collapsed pipe. That would just be a majority blockage. But if in those cases where we're actually changing the structure of the plumbing or of the layout of the pipes, then yeah, permits may be involved. But that really all depends on municipalities and kind of what is going on, what the city requirements are and whatnot. But with our camera inspections and reviewing all the information, when we do camera inspections, we provide videos to our clients. We provide videos of the camera inspection, so you have that for your records. And we also record during the whole process. So our process basically starts off with a camera inspection that gives us the information we need to know. Then we go ahead and we clean. So we clean all the pipes before we line. Like I said, we want to get it back to its original diameter as close as possible.
Can you show the piece that cleans it?
Yeah. So we basically have mechanical tools that basically are connected to an auger. They spin around at a high RPM and basically grind out any of this corrosion that happens. And like I mentioned, we have different head attachments. So if we see that the pipe's a little more delicate, we'll use either like a wire bristle brush or even a sandpaper attachment to fine tune, that corrosion without further damaging the pipe. And then, most of the time, I'd say all the time, if it's a vertical stack, we're not going to hydrojet those vertical stacks, because then that runs the risk of flooding units and causing more damage. Because, if there's a fault in the line, blasting 3,000 PSI of water is going to create a flood. Wow. So a lot of the vertical lines that we work on, we will mechanically clean those. And then once it's back to its original diameter, then we go ahead and we measure everything out prior to. But throughout that whole process, we take our initial camera inspection. Then after cleaning, because a lot of times this corrosion here could be blocking any faults in the line. So you're only seeing corrosion when you do that initial camera inspection. Once you clean it and get it back to its original diameter, that corrosion could be blocking a crack like that.
That makes sense.
So once we do the pre-cleaning videos, we do the after cleaning videos. And then once we install the liner, we do after lining videos to ensure that everything was installed correctly. And then we water test as well to make sure that everything's flowing smoothly and there's no faults in the line.
Okay. Wow. So that's quite a process.
Yeah, and we provide all those videos to our clients after as well. So you get the pre-clean, after clean, and then after lining videos to basically show that, you know, the work that was done is doing its job.
Yes, and to show, you know, like you said, they're behind the walls. You can't see them. You don't just, you know, go about your day and see the interior of your plumbing pipes.
Exactly.
So it's powerful to show those videos, and you know, once you get the, you know, that type of gunk around that pipe and you can show that to the customer, it's visual evidence.
Yeah, exactly. The camera doesn't lie. And a lot of times, I mean, just depending on what how old the community is. I mean, there's a community that we work on in Laguna Beach that it's right on the beach, and we've done, I'd say, 20 to 30 units there in the last 6 months to a year. And all of their 2-inch lines are all restricted down to about 1 inch. We can't even get the camera all the way through. The 4-inch lines are all constricted down to about 2 inches, and it's all just buildup. It was built in 1963, so they're at 60 years old. That's the life expectancy of cast iron, maybe even a little bit over. Plus, it's right on the beach. The salinity in the air increases that process. So, yeah, the camera really doesn't lie. And, you know, a lot of times too, when we're doing residentials, I mean, our customers are watching us do the camera inspection, and they're seeing it while our crews are performing the inspection, and it really blows your mind. You don't think about it. We have a lot of customers that have, you know, they've completely remodeled their bathrooms, they've remodeled their entire house, but they didn't touch their plumbing. So a lot of times I've gotten calls where someone said, hey, you know, I just remodeled my bathroom, our master bathroom 2 years ago. They don't make the tile anymore that we had installed. I don't want to rip it all up and completely remodel it again. And then that's kind of where we come in with this non-invasive solution to rehabilitate it without having to have our customers completely remodel their bathroom 2 years after they already did it.
That makes sense. And so that significantly influences the cost then.
Yeah. So it generally, depending on the project, generally our process is about 30 to 40% cheaper than a traditional replacement, because you're not having to rip out the entire drain system, reinstall it, and then put new flooring, new walls. You got to retexture them, then repaint them, and you know there's a lot that goes into it. So it's generally more time and cost efficient.
That's 30 to
While also getting, you know, the same amount of life out of it. You know, like I said, our liners anywhere from 50 plus years life expectancy. So it's just like installing a new pipe without having to deal with all the destruction that comes along with the traditional replacement.
That makes sense. 30 to 40% is a huge cost savings.
Mm-hmm.
And what percent, how much less time would you say also compared to full architecture?
You know, it depends. It really depends. I think the layout of the pipes also has a lot to do with kind of our process. Installing one liner, we can go through a series of about 270 degrees in turns. So we could go through 3 90-degree turns, just depending on how close in proximity they are. If there's 3 90-degree turns right on top of each other, it might not work. So there are times too where, you know, we try to use existing access as much as possible. There are times though, due to the layout of the pipes, or, you know, like I mentioned earlier, if there is a collapse portion of pipe, there's really no option other than to dig or rip and replace that portion. But then that also gives us an access point. So, you know, making a 3x3 access hole to traditionally replace something, or if the layout doesn't work, doing a 3x3 access point is a lot better than still ripping out or trenching 80 feet of pipe. So There are times where we do need to create access in order to do the project, but it's still a lot less invasive than completely ripping everything out behind walls and floors and replacing it that way.
That makes sense. And are there any payment plans or financing options that associations could take advantage of with PRS?
I mean, if we're working on an association, we typically work on kind of like a schedule of values. So basically we come up with a plan to do the project. And we can also phase it out too. So we can say, hey, you know what, this area of the community is experiencing pretty heavy root intrusion due to the mature trees that are around. So let's tackle that area first. And we can kind of phase it out into different sections and kind of work with the community depending on what their financial situations are. We can work in different sections and kind of phase the project out to where we're being able to slowly mitigate the problems, but also, work within the community's budget. I mean, there are times where communities have done a special assessment or whatnot to get their projects done. But there are a lot of times we tend to phase out the project. And what we also do is if we're working in a large community, there's the HOA's responsibility, and then there's the individual homeowner's responsibility. So if we're working on a community, we're dealing with all of their shared lines. We can also work with individual homeowners and kind of almost basically give them a bulk pricing, because we're already on site, we're already working there. We can give them, a discounted pricing to do their individual responsibility and line from the shared line out into their main line up to their kitchen or bathroom or whatever the case may be. So we kind of can, manage the project. And that's one thing that we do pride ourselves on, is managing the project from start to finish and giving options to the community as a whole, but also individual owners.
That's great. And, for individual owners to be able to take advantage of that bulk pricing, that's great value you're providing them.
Yeah. I mean, we really pride ourselves on just being a better solution overall to a traditional replacement, because no one likes living in a construction zone. I've done it before in my personal house, and it's not fun. There's dust everywhere. There are so many issues that come along with that. You can't go into certain rooms, whatnot, and that's what we really pride ourselves on, is that we try to come up with the most efficient solution, but also the most cost effective and the least invasive. And like I said, no one likes to live in a construction zone. It's not fun.
No one likes to live in a construction zone, and cost savings is huge.
Yeah.
And one question I have, preventative maintenance. You've mentioned root intrusion several times. Are there, including root intrusion or any sort of other issues that may arise with pipes? Is there any preventative maintenance actions that associations can take for their pipes?
I think doing the camera inspection, like I said, if the pipe's anywhere from 25, or if the community's anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, definitely get a camera inspection done. If we're going to be working on a community, it's not necessarily cost effective to look at every single line. What we'll do is kind of get a general idea. We'll do about 20 to 25% of the community's lines to get a general idea of the layout and the condition, because if it was all installed at the same time, the condition's most likely going to be similar, unless there were times where there's been emergencies where they've had to rip and replace sections. But for the most part, it's all going to be in the same condition. We try to get as many different viewpoints of different layouts that there might be. But the camera inspection, I think I definitely recommend doing a camera inspection. If even if the community is anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, it'd probably be a good idea to at least do either mechanical cleaning or hydrojetting to just keep the corrosion down, clear any root intrusion problems. Their roots are, you can clear those out, but if there's a fault in the line, those roots are still going to come back. The roots will consistently look for water wherever available. So I think,
Wow.
yeah, as far as preventative maintenance, really just staying on top of it. Because like I said, it's out of sight, out of mind. People don't think about plumbing until it's a problem.
No, they don't.
And then you're dealing with, then you're dealing with sewage problems, and you don't want sewage problems. I mean, the first house my wife and I bought, the very first day we moved in, I moved in all day, and then I went to go take a shower, and the toilet started bubbling.
Wow.
And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. That was prior to me working here. I didn't know what it meant, but we had about a 95% blockage of our main line that went out to the city sewer line. And there was actual sewage coming up out of our bathtub at one point. And it's something that you don't want to deal with it. It's not a pleasant experience. So really just staying ahead of it and just knowing that it is something that does need to be looked at from time to time in order to prevent those problems.
Absolutely. That's that's a hazard. It's really just, I can't imagine, how that was for you and your wife moving into your new home.
Yeah, it was the joys of home ownership right in the first day.
Wow. The joys of home ownership. So are there any safety considerations that PRS has to consider before projects or as they're going through projects?
Like safety considerations, I mean, really, as long as we have access to the line, there's really no issues. I mean, as far as going through the project, there are times where if we do need to traditionally excavate and replace a portion of line, depending on how deep that line is, if it's anything over 5 feet in the ground, then you most likely need shoring in order to prevent any, the walls caving in, basically. But that, as far as safety precautions of the whole lining process, there's really not, you don't want to touch the epoxy as it's curing, because it actually heats up. So so it's, I mean, but our technicians are all dealing with that. So it's, and they all wear protective gear. But that's also one of the things with the root intrusion. So root intrusion, if there's any roots coming through, I mean, we could go ahead and clean this line out. So we clean the inside of this line out, but there's still going to be roots that are going to be flush where this blue portion is. There's still roots that are going to be flush with the pipe, even though we cleaned it out. The whole inside is still the same diameter. But when we install the liner, the epoxy heats up while it's curing. So basically, not only is it going to be a seamless line once it's installed, but anything touching this portion while the epoxy is curing, it basically, any roots touching it, it's basically going to cauterize them or burn them to.
Wow.
So yeah, it won't. Roots, once this is installed, roots are most of the time no longer an issue.
That's really interesting. And so that's some type of chemical reaction that's creating that heat.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a 2-part epoxy. So we mix it on site, then we saturate the liner with it, and then fold it up. We kind of fold it up like a taco. And then we typically will tape it off so the whole line stays tight. And then we push it in, and then pretty much basically once we inflate the bladder, that kind of pops all that tape, keeping it in. And then it makes the liner adhere to the inside of the pipe. And then it generally takes about 4 to 6 hours for the epoxy to cure. So while we're cleaning, Normal use of the lines are permitted. You know, you can use the toilet, use the sinks, take a shower, whatnot, while we're doing the cleaning process. And we'll always provide kind of shutdown schedules, you know, as we're doing the project. And then the days that we install the liners, we just have, there's typically, it's anywhere from 4 to 6 hours where there's no water usage permitted. And then for 24 hours after the liner's installed, just no boiling water down the sink. You can use hot water out of the faucet. That's not a problem. Just know, you know, if you make a big pasta dinner, just wait until that water cools down to pour it down the sink.
That makes sense. And those are not very long restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, for the most part, we try to have systems up and running at the end of each day. You know, and there's times where, you know, if we're working in certain communities, we'll do night work to, you know, minimize usage of the lines. It really all depends. And we try to work with communities as much as possible on what's going to work best for them.
That's awesome. Well, Eric, we learned a lot about pipe restoration solutions, you know, services and products and how they provide value to HOAs and even individual members of HOAs who can take advantage of bulk pricing if you know they'd like to. Are there any, you know, last considerations, homeowner associations, possibly homeowner association managers, you'd want them to consider?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, that's one of our strong points is working with HOAs, and we've worked with thousands of HOAs throughout our 20+ years. But you know, we stand by our product, and it's just as good as installing a brand new pipe, but you're not having to deal with the headache of ripping things out, replacing things afterwards, you know, dealing with the commotion of that ripping and replacing. You know, you're not having to trench, no heavy equipment, no chainsaws, no jackhammers. I mean, there are times where we do need to make access, but for the most part, you know, it's a lot less invasive and just as long of a solution. And we also do offer a 10-year warranty on our workmanship and product. So once the project's done, and we provide a certificate of warranty, and so basically 10 years after that, we just recommend anyone that has an issue, let us know, and we come out and take a look at it and then assess it from there. So we always want to stand by our product and our service and just make sure that, you know, everything's working according to plan, and we want to keep our customers happy and keep moving forward.
The 10-year warranty surely helps.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, you know, and that's, yeah, it's definitely, you know, it's something that we stand by. So we always like to, you know, provide that to our customers once the project's done, and let them know that if there ever is an issue with a portion of the line that we've worked on, that, you know, we're there to back it up.
Awesome. And where can customers go and find pipe restoration solutions or reach out to pipe restoration solutions?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website. It's just prspipe.com. And then we also have our LinkedIn page, PRS Pipe Restoration Solutions. But we're pretty active on LinkedIn and social media in general, and then our website as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Karash. I really appreciate it.